Okay, welcome everybody. Now, I hope that this will take about 30 minutes. That's what it took my partner, bless her, while she sat through it. She said it was quite good and it was interesting to know what I do. So hopefully you'll feel the same way. And we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. So when I started thinking about the changes that are happening in the labor market, the changes that are happening in fintech and in a lot of businesses, a lot of people are talking about things like, what else could I do? Or is there something else that I could get involved in my team? Or how do I help people in my team, particularly in furlough situations, and we just have less bums on seats? We need to help each other out. So I thought, if I can help you to understand what it's like to be in product, maybe that's a good thing. And I needed something to inspire me, so I've picked So You Want to Be a Hero, which is the quest for glory way back from 1989 and defined part of my computer gaming childhood. There might be a couple of people on the call old enough to recognize this. You'll see this through the slide deck. So let's see. There we go. I'm Oliver. I'm a Senior Product Manager at FORM3. That basically means I'm a product person who works on an area that's big enough to be called senior. FORM3 is a financial cloud, and our purpose is to democratize bank payments. And what that means is that we provide a financial cloud, which happens to be hosted on the good friends at AWS, so something that you've all learned about in a previous talk. And that means we work with from small startups and challenges all the way through to the banks that you'll all know, and we help them to process payments faster, cheaper, better. So pretty straightforward, but what I love about tech and about fintech particularly is that everything we do improves the industry in a way that really affects people, because when a salary goes through or a mortgage payment goes through, it should be fast and it should happen when people expect it to. Okay, so let's have a look at the backlog for today. First of all, what is product? A little bit about what I think makes a good PM, how you could look at getting into product for folks around you who may say, there's a product role I'd like to have a crack at. What do you think? And what does a day in the life look like? And finally, what does your PM need from you? So let's have a think about who does product well. Some of these brands you'll be aware of, some will have come and gone. Some of them you will have found out about this invite from, such as LinkedIn. What links these companies together? Why are these brands still part of our lives? And how come they've not been replaced by anybody else? So let's just take an example. If we take smartphones. Now, some people will remember the technology-led world of Motorola and Ericsson. A few of us probably had those phones back in the day, back in the 90s. They were kind of replaced and usurped by more of a marketing-led approach. And this particular phone is the Nokia that was used in The Matrix. And that's when smartphones became cool, if you like. However, they still didn't really want to have a color screen. They certainly weren't touch screens, and my mum didn't know how to use it. Along came a product-led company, which you may have all heard of, and some of you have even dialed in using. And Apple took a different approach, partly because of the culture. And Steve Jobs has a singular vision, as we all know, or had a singular vision. And what's really important here is that they looked at it and said, people want to be able to jab their fingers on their screens. They want to be able to open apps and close apps. Let's bring some of the GUI, some of the graphical user interface of desktops into phones. And let's do this in a way that people actually like to use. And the moral of the story is, I doubt that any of us have a Motorola or a Nokia phone, but a lot of us have Apple phones. Take out number one, and there's a few of these through the presentation. Product companies win. And another example of a product which is quite a different one is AWS. So Amazon, the book company, sell books online, realized, I imagine, that required a lot of tech, built their own cloud, and started selling that cloud to other people. And they have remained in front of the game, even with people like Microsoft and Google very much getting into that space. And the way that they've done that is by owning the product development cycle, I would say. I find it very uncommon to come across anybody that thinks that that you can do more in Azure and Google Cloud than you can on on AWS. And that is because they've got this cycle of improve, improve, improve. So what is product? I quite like this. Marty Kagan is the founder of a lot of the product movement, along with people like Sinek. The main claim to fame in his case is from eBay. And in his case, a product manager is responsible that what gets built is valuable and viable. He's not talking about getting it done faster. He's talking about it being useful and something that we could continue to support and something that makes money. And I think that's quite critical, because a lot of the time, folks around the product team probably think that the product team is mostly just focused on what next. And that is part of it. But the business goal, is it valuable, is it viable, ongoing, is something that's never far from the minds. There is more commercial to a product manager than just technical. So let's have a look at the stakeholders. How many of you are on this call? We've obviously got our friends, the users. They might be partners if we have an indirect channel. They might be customers. They might be customers that have customers. We've got the rest of the business, and that could include operations, that could include customer success, and then we've got engineering. Now, it's easy as a product person to spend all of your time in engineering and ignore business and ignore users. And I think that's where I saw product begin back in the 90s. And in fact, one of the product managers I served under as an assistant at the time was known as the no guy, because when people asked him, could we do this thing? He would just say no, because he had a very clear vision for where we needed to go. That business did particularly well and got sold, but product has changed significantly now, and now sits in the intersection of these three main stakeholder groups. I should say also, feel free to jump in and ask a question at any time, although there will be plenty of time at the end. So what about the product team? What does that look like? And these names often get thrown around, but I think it's worth defining them, at least according to me. So you've got the product manager in the center, to which the team is named. They are looking after an area of product, and that could be the backlog of that product, and that's also the order in which things are built, what gets built, what does not get built, and who is it for, what do they think of it, do they understand how to use it, and what do they want next. The project manager is also a key role, and project managers generally get involved when programs get large enough, rollouts get large enough, that one person can't look after them anymore. So they are worth their weight in gold. And generally, if you have project people in your team, you probably have long-term relationships with larger customers. Then there are the good old business analysts, and I would have as many as I could. And a lot of product people come from business analyst roles, and these folks are absolutely critical to the process of understanding what's going on around us, gathering requirements, organizing things, writing specifications, and helping things to get done. They're also really good at research projects. Then we have the product owner. And a product owner is interesting because they can at times be mixed with a product manager in roles and in jobs that you'll see advertised. The reason for that is that the product owner generally is very internally focused and very focused on working with a Scrum team, typically, to get things done. So it's, what are we doing next? Exactly how are we doing it? How is it going? What do we need to alter to get these things shipped? And where they're working with the product manager is the product manager has a slightly higher level view and is also talking to those other two groups of business and users. I hope that makes sense. And then outside that team, I commonly really closely interface with a lead engineer, or maybe two or three, depending on how many Scrum teams I'm working with. And that person is obviously responsible for the folks that will do the work. And they want to know what's coming next, why do you want to do it that way, and give you their opinion, often in quite hilarious but very well-intentioned ways. And then there's the product designer. And this area has grown even more recently than the product area as a discipline, hasn't it? So having a UX person on the team is also critical for making sure that what we design is easy to use. Because it turns out, partially from experience, neither engineers or product people, or even me, can build things that are super easy to use, because it is a specific skill set. And as you can tell from some of my presentation not passing accessibility, these things need to be considered in order to build the best products. Any questions on the product team or on perhaps the people you see around you? Okay, and I shall keep going. So where does product fit within the business idea through to continuation? So first of all, you've got the why or the who. And apologies, this is going to sound a little bit sales presentation, but these words are accurate words that have just been misused in a lot of training sessions. So there's a why. The founder or the group of people or a customer has a very specific need. That's been identified down to a group of people. So if we take someone like Amazon, what do we want to do? We want to sell books online. Who do we want to sell them to? Bookworms. The next question is, what exactly do we want to sell? Is it a web app? Is it a mobile app? Is it a subscription service? Is it something that nobody ever sees but other people sell, like the Google Maps API that appears in somebody else's website? When do we want to deliver these things? Do we want to have a web service first and then a mobile app? That's a critical decision. Get it the wrong way around and you're never heard of again, like Barnes & Noble. And then how are we going to deliver this? What technology are we going to use? Will we build, will we buy, will we partner? And in the case of Amazon, they built, and resulting in AWS or Amazon Web Services. The other thing that product fits into is what next, the then of this equation. And very quickly, once you get something out to market, you're thinking about, what does this mean? What do we need to change? Where is enough? What else could we do? And so that's where the prioritization piece that we all often deal with product managers around comes from. So the point of all of this is the value is not what gets built. It's the value of what gets used. And this is really important. I've worked for plenty of companies. I've had plenty of competitors, and I've heard plenty of stories of companies that have built amazing tech that never got used. And while the act of building itself is really cool and really fun, it's certainly good to have a job next year. And it's also certainly good to deliver things that we know are going to be really helpful. So the point is that enough is enough. You've heard the phrase MVP, or minimum viable product, or maybe minimum lovable product, as our head of operations likes to say. The point is, we only need to build enough. eBay is absolutely huge, and the UX, the user experience, is not that great. I wouldn't feel that proud of it, but I would feel proud of the fact that it's become a global force and defined an industry in terms of e-commerce. The point is, they built enough, they shipped it, and then they listened to people in terms of, I need to be able to do this or do that. They didn't just build the most amazing thing they could. That's the point. So what makes a great PM? Strength, agility, vitality, luck, etc. I asked a few people on LinkedIn, and these are some of the thoughts that came back. A good listener, communicator, and translator. And that's interesting coming from someone in finance, because although it may not be immediately obvious, when spending a lot of money building great things, the finance team is keen to know, how much is it going to cost? How much longer is it going to take? And how much money do we think it might make? And so translating from the internal technical world to the user's world to the financial world is an important role of a PM. Also, cross-functional communication. This from our head of marketing, Laura. That's another interesting one, because we build things that need to be talked about, that need to be promoted, and need to be understood. And I think it's important to be able to communicate that we are changing these 3 things, and it means that. And that for our customers means these things. And that process of communicating across the business what we are doing next and why, and what we are not doing next, is something I spend a lot of time doing. Empathy. So this is from a CIO in New Zealand, James. An interesting one, because he runs teams, technical teams, and often has to say no, or it will take too long, or it's going to cost a lot of money, we need to find another way. So what he's looking for, and what I think a lot of engineering teams are looking for, is someone that listens and actually comes to understand the technical realities of wanting to build this cool thing or change this cool thing we've already got. Servant leadership. This from another product manager. Negotiation skills and technical enough to make good decisions. There are technical product managers, and there are commercial, like myself. I think what's most important is just loving technology, rather than knowing everything about it. You just need to know someone who does. But what's interesting is the servant leadership piece. We'll come back to that in a minute. Lastly, from a founder and an MD, team building, focus, and lie detection. Lie detection, I think we can leave to one side, but part of that is when somebody asks for something, do they really need it? How many people need it? How much do they need it? That's kind of where you've got to drill in with the Six Sigma kind of why type idea to get to the core of a need. But team building is a really important one, which we will also pick up on. So the takeout from all of that for me is that product is a mindset. It is a way of thinking. And that also is quite critical because that is not owned by product. That is something that feeds across the business. And something that I've certainly found at Form3 is that we've got a group of people, like a lot of good startups and a lot of larger businesses, that just want to get something done and to do it the best that they can. And they start to think about these elements. What are we doing? What are we doing next? Why are we doing it? How valuable is it? What's the minimum we could do to get this thing out there so we can find out if people like it? And what is the product process? Now, this I will keep short because we've got plenty of engineering folks who know more about this than me. I call it slaying the bear, and I just wanted to put this image in because I love this game. But looking back in time, we had this thing called Waterfall. It was a traditional product development process. We had an idea, we researched it, we analyzed it, we developed it, and we launched it. And we got to the end and thought, damn, it doesn't actually match with what people wanted 2 years ago when we started. Maybe this whole process is taking too long, unless you're building a bridge. That's different. Along came this idea of Agile, and I'm not about to preach, but what is important about the Agile movement is that we realize that there are shorter cycles of requirement design, develop, test, deploy. So get the idea, decide how to do it, test it, and then get it out there. Find out what people think about it, and then iterate. And that's what companies like Google and Amazon are just amazing at. In terms of deployments per day, large numbers. We're not talking once a quarter, once a year. We're talking multiple times a day. So what's the point? What we've learned as a product group, and I think as a technology group, is the quicker we can get something out and test it, the quicker we can learn what else we need to do, what works, what doesn't work. So where do PMs come from? And this is for anybody who's thinking about moving into it or may have someone around them who is. So I've seen people come from project management. I've seen them come from business analysis. I've seen people come from ops, engineering, marketing, which is kind of my path, and also from leadership. I've even come across CTOs who became founders who decided that we need product and I'll do it, and then realized I need a product manager and I don't want to have to deal with this. And that's a direct quote. He's a good man. So once you get into product, there's also lots of places you can go to. It's not a place you get stuck, and I really don't think many roles in tech are these days. So you could come out as a senior PM, which is the stage I've got to, the stage beyond it in terms of head of product for a business, and then even the level beyond that, where you could be the chief operations officer or COO, or the CPO, chief product officer. You might become a scrum master. I've also seen that. I just want to get more involved in how teams get things done and leave the planning to other people and people who may go on to found. So what might that look like as a career? I think this is something that's not often discussed, and hopefully this slide will be helpful, particularly when you talk to younger folks around you. You might come from business analysis. You might go into product owner, start looking after a backlog, working with a scrum team, focusing on a very specific area and getting work done. You might then become a product manager, then move on to a larger area of product, if you like, as a senior PM. Finally, a head of product, looking after a group of product managers and product teams, and then a chief product officer. Now, what do all of these steps on the left-hand side have in common before you get to chief product officer? That none of them have a seat on the board. And that's really important. That's where the servant leadership idea comes from. I'm here to help as a product person. I don't own any of this, except maybe the outcome of the product and the P&L associated with it. But I don't manage any of the team. The only way I can get things done is by talking to people and herding the cats, as I've heard people say in the past. So let's have a quick look at my career, and this just is really to give you an idea that there is no set path and that you could have some time in product and go back to doing something else very easily. So I started off as a marketing assistant. Someone said, we don't need that anymore. We want you to do this product thing. This is in the 90s. Then a product manager, had a career break. And during that time, I think a lot of people do when they get into their 30s and want to try something else. Then back into customer success because I decided IT was easier than NGO work. And then into marketing because someone said, you've done some marketing before, haven't you? Can you do that for me? And back into product because the COO said, we really need a product person. And you used to do that, right? And I said, actually, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And he said, this isn't a question. This is what we need. Point being, often we find ourselves in roles that the business needs, not necessarily what we went out to find, but it almost always leads to an interesting learning experience. And why the photo down the bottom right? That's a result of a guy in Peru saying, hey, we should build a jump and go 2 on the sandboard. Let's do it. And that ended with a couple of scars on my hand. But the point is that my career, and I think a lot of careers, often feel like a bit of a roller coaster where somebody else had a good idea and we thought we'd give it a go. Generally, that person is a founder or a hiring manager, but it's okay. There is no set path. You can move between areas and build your experience along the way. So what do PMs actually do? Here's just a very high level, like that beard, like that hat. I think a lot of PMs like to think we're quite hipster, although we're all getting a bit older, and I certainly am. There's all the different areas of work. The product lifecycle management of when do we need to start it, grow it, mature it, and then end it, because products do get end of life. What's going into the backlog and how should things look and how easy are they to use? That's the UX piece. What's the roadmap look like for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? If I had a pound for every time a tech lead said that, quite rightly, I'd be certainly well off. There's the business model work, which comes into the business analyst work, and that is, should we do it? Is there money in it? How should we do it? Should we do it this way or that way? And that decision-making stuff is quite interesting. Then there's a bit of research, and often it's the product manager along with marketing that needs to look at what the competition are doing and who to build, buy, and partner with. And then finally, the vision and the leadership. It is important to take in and drink the Kool-Aid, the full vision from the founding team or the leadership team, and then to share that out to the rest of the business in terms of how we're going to do it. And my thought, and this is actually an Ollie quote, product managers have all the responsibility of the product, of the profit and loss, but no seat on the board. We are servant leaders, and it's important to be comfortable with that. So how can you help your product team? You're my eyes and ears. The interesting thing about product is I sit in the middle. We all sit in the middle. And I know there's some PMs on the call, and you'll know what I mean. But we can't understand everything. We don't have the time. We don't have the bandwidth, and we're not experts. So if you know something needs to be done, or you see a flashing red light, you need to take that to your product team. They need it to be spoken up loudly because there is a lot of noise. Everything that needs to be done comes across a PM's desk at some stage. And how do you determine that of the last 30 things, these 2 should float to the top? Part of that is from the passion from the person who's telling the story. That also means I need the short version. If you tell me all the detail, I just might not get it, and we might run out of time. So give me the short version of what we need to do and why. Start at the beginning, because I'm usually not the expert, and usually I'm new to the concept. You might know the history. That's awesome. Summarize it for me. Treat me as a dummy. I'm not going to take that badly. I'm actually going to appreciate the fact that you explain it in terms that I can understand quickly. And then when we talk about a thing and what we need to do, challenge me on it. You know, tell me if you think this is a bad idea. The UX doesn't need an overhaul. It just needs tweaking. But then once we've gone through that process of discussing it, looking at the different options and choosing one as a group, as a team, get on board and let's get it done. Let's not have an endless cycle of review, such as, should we be agile? Are we agile enough? Are we using Jira right? And we can only do this together. So your PM cannot operate in isolation. If you haven't spoken to them for a while, that might be because they're working on something. It might also be that they've become a bit isolated and they need to be brought back into what you were doing. So I love it when people contact me and say, hello, it's such and such from Ops. Just wanted to check in and let you know that we're doing this thing for that customer. Thought you might like to learn about it. That sort of stuff, super valuable. So the point is the product is a team effort. It's not one person, although one person or a group of people might carry the title that includes product. It's something that the group has responsibility for, because ultimately we all have responsibility for the product, for the business, for the bottom line. So what are the pros and cons of being in product? The breeze is cool, you feel a shiver deeper than the cold, you're on your own in a very dangerous place. That was a highlight of this game. And it is sometimes how things can feel in startups and bigger firms. So the pros, it's exciting. It's never boring. No 2 days are the same. It's really, really enjoyable. It is very constructive by its nature. Sometimes you're killing a product because it needs to be replaced, but most of the time, spending time thinking about how can we do this better? How can we solve this problem? And personally, I love that. We solve problems and use the latest technology. And I think that is really cool as well. Like, why should it be Kubernetes rather? You know, why are we maxing out our Lambdas? What does that mean? What is serverless? I thought we talked about microservices. How does this stuff fit together into a, we can scale to the volume I need you to? You know, that stuff, it's really cool. It's constantly changing. It is actually well paid, although PMs will always say that engineers and salespeople get paid more. It is well paid. It is a solid job, and it is solid in a difficult time like right now. And I'm very grateful to be employed in an ongoing manner. And it's meaningful. Without product, without deciding what to do next, businesses flounder, build amazing things that no one uses, and fail. So it can really make a difference. And that is something that drives me and a lot of product folks. The cons, with great power comes great responsibility. And that burden can be quite heavily felt, particularly if a business is having a difficult time, such as during COVID, when things might be pivoting, when things that worked before no longer work now, when changes need to happen. The buck stops with you. So ultimately, it's going to be the leadership team that contact me directly to talk about my product if it's not working. There is nobody else. There is nowhere else to hide. It's going to be me presenting those slides, having that conversation. It can involve long hours, and so can any job, particularly in tech, but product particularly can be quite long hours. So it's really important to join a business and be in a culture like I am now, where it's understood that people work better and longer and happier if they don't overwork. You need to be organized. Not being organized won't work. So that's absolute baseline. And lastly, sometimes it feels like you're cracking the invisible whip, meaning I'm cracking the whip and nobody's moving. Why? Because they've got other things to do. And the thing that I want to add into the stream of work that's coming up is an interruption. They don't want to be interrupted. They want to get this other thing done. You know, sometimes it's hard to know when to interrupt and when to step back and let the team do the work. So here are some lessons learned, and this is basically it. The product is the science of decision making. It really is listening to people, looking around, and then deciding what this means, how important is this, what should we do about it, and when should we do something about it. Personally, I love that. Yield the battle sometimes to win the war. It might be that there's something you know you need to do, like addressing tech debt. But the leadership team have just brought in this new deal, and you have to move in a particular direction. You know that tech debt is not going to go away. You know that if it's not addressed, it's going to cause a problem. However, you've got to balance that against the commercial realities of this deal has come in. It's a good thing for the business. How do we work them in together in order to win that war? It's never a no, although I often say no to people, but it's a this comes first. Thank you for calling. Your call is important to us. After a short wait, your thing will get its moment. Accept uncertainty, but manage the level. And I think this goes right across tech. Right now, it's an uncertain world. And that's not ideal, but it's manageable. And when we look at a business and we look at the market and we look at the customers and we look at a product within that, yes, we might not know what is happening right now. Yes, we might be seeing some strange usage patterns, maybe addressing new markets, but we can manage the level of uncertainty by going through this decision-making and research process very quickly and in decisive moments. The best leaders are always followed willingly. And if product involves leadership of people to get towards getting the right thing done, then that leadership is never going to work. And I've seen it really not work for certain PMs if you are beating people up with a stick. It really must be here's the idea, let's explain it, let's understand it, and let's do something about it together. You've got to like working with your PM or you won't talk to them. And lastly, but not least, always be listening to the team around you. That's something that I'm still learning. And I run podcasts partly to teach myself to listen more. And don't forget to enjoy it, because building cool stuff with really smart people and changing things in a meaningful way, it's really quite cool. So what's the takeout? I don't need to know everything as a product person. I just need to know someone who does, like Henry Ford. Press a button, get an answer. I know that if there's a problem, if I think there's a lingering problem in something that relates to a customer, then I'll go to operations, maybe through to support. If I think there's a problem in our tech stack and some architectural decisions are needed, I'll talk to the engineering team and go through until I get introduced to the right person who has the history on it. All you need to know is somebody who does. You don't need to know it all. So that's all. And if you wanted to find out more, here's a couple of ideas. On the right-hand side, Marty Kagan's book Inspired is absolutely brilliant and is quite a nice blow-by-blow summary of how to do product right. If you want something more local, either to London or Brighton or the variety of other areas in the centre, Mind the Product run a really good series of product tanks. And those are free meetups that occur once a month, once every couple of months. Really recommend those to hear different people talk about things. The Silicon Valley Product Group have a nice free newsletter, which is really helpful. And I have a podcast called Old Fox, Young Fox, which is a discussion of intergenerational nature when we talk about issues that face us in tech, but also more broadly in terms of Brexit and things like that, if you haven't heard enough of my voice and you want more. So, in summary, if you remember one thing, remember this slide. Product companies win. Product is the way that Google Gmail has become so awesome and so pervasive. It doesn't look great, we don't love it, but it's winning. Same with eBay. Enough is enough. Get to that point of enough. Think about what is really the baseline to get this thing out there and get people using it and enjoying using it and wanting to use it some more. Product is a mindset. It's a mindset that pervades the whole organization and really comes down to that decision-making process in all things. Get to test quickly. He or she who gets to test quickly gets feedback the fastest and builds the next step the best. Product is a team effort. It takes us all to get things done, and it's not enough to shout on a parapet and shake one's fist. And all you need to know is someone who does. And drawing on people around you is a really critical step. So my role's fairly new. I've met at least 55 people in the team. That might seem exhausting to some, and I guess it's a lot of meetings, but it also means that I've learned what everybody thinks about what we do as an organization. And that's critical for me to thread a path through of what we should do next. So, some credits. Thanks to Luke and the team at Hayes Tech. I think these sessions are a really good thing. Thank you to Form3 for keeping me hired, and we are hiring rapidly, so go to form3.tech if you'd like to find out more, and that's where you can find me. Thank you. Questions?